Marie Robinson was very young. Her father told her early and often that she was the smartest girl he had ever known. And he continued to tell her that as she grew and learned. He encouraged her to work hard at school, aim for scholarships, and reach the potential he saw in her. And she became, in his words, the smartest woman he had ever known, and that she could do anything. And she did. Today, she's the Executive Vice President and Chief Supply Chain Officer of Sysco, a global leader in selling, marketing, and distributing food and non-food products to restaurants. But scroll through Marie's LinkedIn profile and you see huge career milestones that would impress and inspire anyone. We wanted to know what she learned from each of those experiences, so we asked her. Your LinkedIn was updated with your experience. What I'm gonna do is it's like a this is your life kind of thing. I'm gonna take you through your positions. Tell me the biggest lesson you learned from each one.
Okay.
All right, so, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if I have any of this wrong. Logistics officer in the U.S. Army.
Yes.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I was a kid. It was, I was an ROTC student at the University of Alabama. I got my commission, so I graduated, normal thing. I actually ended up going on active duty in January of the year after I graduated. So then I went through all the training classes, jumped out of some planes, had some fun.
Oh, wow.
Showed up to my first duty station in July of 1990. Deployed to Saudi Arabia in August of 1990. So literally brand new in post. And my very first job was leading a platoon of truck drivers.
Oh my gosh.
And I think definitely what I learned in that role is absolutely the importance of those frontline workers.
Yeah.
Nothing moves in a war zone without truck drivers. They're literally moving everything from port to battlefield if it's a ground exercise, and just making sure that they were cared for. Yeah.
Holy smokes. Vice President Logistics, Walmart?
After 11 years. So I started my time at Walmart as a shipping dock supervisor in Bentonville, came in, and then kind of joined a team that went around the country at the time and opened new distribution centers. It was the heyday it was when they were launching super centers, back in the mid-90s.
Right.
So we were literally building new distribution centers, and then we would turn it over back to the local team. I did that for a while. Ended up as a general manager back home in Alabama for a short period of time, and then went to Bentonville. And I was their vice president of specialty, which meant it was anything non-standard. Okay. So I got to do some really fun things, like the first e-commerce fulfillment centers at Walmart.
That is cool.
I'm old. I can truly say I've been doing e-commerce since the day it was born. And we learned so much along the way about you can think what a customer wants to buy in those early days online, and then you learn what they actually want to buy online. That job, for me at Walmart, it was all about just being part of a really well-run company.
Yeah, that's cool. It might seem like I'm jumping around a little, but there's a reason, so I'll come back. Senior Vice President, Smart and Final.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one. Smart
and Final is a niche grocery player at the time on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And at the time when I joined them, they were a publicly traded company. About 50% B2C and 50% B2B. Okay. And for the very first time, I had supply chain. So I couldn't point fingers at anybody anymore about those silly people buying all that inventory, or those transportation people. So it was a small enough company that you did a lot of things. It's kind of typical at a small company. Yeah. And there, I had my first true private fleet, as an example. So it was the very first time that I had a true fleet. I was running distribution centers. I was running the inventory and replenishment group as well. And in that role, learning how to be a direct report of a CEO, that was the first role where I was, the face of supply chain at the company. And just realizing the responsibility that comes with that. And I knew it all along, but it's also the place where this principle of hire people who are smarter than you, and then just support them. Find the people who fill in the gaps that you have in your own tool set, and make sure that you're doing everything you can to help them thrive.
Okay, Senior Vice President, Chief Logistics Officer, Toys R Us.
Yeah. did 2 tours at Toys R Us.
That's why I was going to come back, because you were there
Yeah.
in, what, 03, and
I
then left
did.
and came back.
And when I left Walmart, it was to follow my husband. He had gotten a position on the West Coast.
Okay.
So I was terrified. I'd never been unemployed before.
Yeah.
After a few weeks of networking and such, I found a role at Toys R Us. They were looking for someone to run the western half of the country for them. And having been at Walmart, where it's so big that you really specialize in a type of distribution or a type of transportation, the Toys R Us job was the first job where I was now running, transportation, private fleet, distribution centers, and engineering.
Right.
So I began to get experience across the supply chain. And it was a fun job. They had hired me, and they had hired another person from Target to run the eastern half of the country.
Okay.
And so we spent a lot of time, I think of it as teaching.
Right.
What are the right processes to put in place? What are the right metrics to put into place? And it was the first time I had, that large a geography to cover. It was kind of the Mississippi River to Hawaii.
Senior Vice President, Global Operations, Michael Kors.
Yeah, I was their Chief Operating Officer for a while. And when I joined Michael Kors in 2014, they had experienced this incredible period of growth, and yet they had never had a supply chain professional at the company. So they brought me in to quite literally build supply chain. So it was fun.
Wow, that is.
I got to hire all the teams and teach them the metrics and help them understand what a supply chain organization looks like, what value it brings. After a couple of years, they asked me to also lead corporate strategy. So that was the first time they had a strategic officer. So getting to work with the board and think about the business,
Right.
not just supply chain.
Right.
And then as part of that strategy, we decided to start looking to acquire other heritage luxury brands. And in a period of 18 months, we bought Jimmy Choo and Versace.
Okay, and now Sysco.
Yeah.
So, and you joined in May of 2020 here? Is that when you-
March.
Actual March. Okay, so
March.
was it the before or was it the after?
It was, so the week before I joined, Kevin Hurricane, our CEO, had actually asked me if I could join some daily calls that were happening. That turned out to be the last week the office was open.
Yeah.
So I was doing video calls. The team didn't even know who I was yet. I'm just appearing at these calls. And my first official week with Sysco was the week that we shut these offices down.
Oh my gosh.
And so the first few months, as I look back on it, I actually think from an onboarding speed, it was just everything at warp speed.
Yeah.
I had to learn at a pace, just to get us through and to add value in a certain way. At a company like Sysco, where it's intensely human capital intensive, you have to remember that. And you've got to make sure that, we stay invested no matter what's happening around us in things like training and in things like safety training and precautions, because those frontline colleagues, nothing happens without them. So whether it's our sales force and our wonderful sales consultants, our delivery partners, the people that work in our warehouses, and I think it's just staying really true to the principles that to be most important. We've done things like start up our own academies. I think we talked about that a little bit last year. They're flourishing, and it's making a difference in regards to that early retention and early attraction. About half of our delivery partners that we've trained through those academies to give them their CDLA now were warehouse associates. And it gives them this pathway to a very different job and role. But what we also learned is that their supervisor is the most important person in their ecosystem.
Right.
So making sure that you're also spending time with those brand new frontline leaders. Most of the time, they were a really great driver, or they were a really good warehouse selector. And now we're going to move them into supervision. And you have to help them understand it's not just about being the best at what you did. You actually now have to lead people. Yes, leadership is always the most important thing, and making sure that you know the names, you know the birthdays. It's not just a transactional, you're here at work today, here's what you're expected to do. But they're also rather technical jobs.
Right.
It's complex to work inside any distribution center or transportation operation today with the systems and the complexity. So they have leadership is the most important, but they also have to be comfortable with tech, and they have to be system savvy enough to navigate and know when things need to be adjusted, know when decisions need to be made. So we're spending a lot of time on that technical training as well.